Hear me? I think so. Good morning, everybody. Check my slides. Okay. So, thank you. Yes, I'm Marina Simpson. I work in Digital Directorate. I am part of the Data Management and Identity Verification team. Huge, big kind of a slogan, but essentially, one of the main roles that I undertake on a day-to-day basis is around data policy. And by that, we cover a wide range of data interests, and including that is open data. So first of all, thank you for, I suppose, being part of the programme today. When Sally approached my boss, Jane Morgan, who some of you may have come across probably, I don't know, early summertime, and spoke about ambition for a programme and an event, we were delighted to be able to support that. Really as a showcase to some of the really good work going on, and being an opportunity kind of to share that. And so I think, really, what I've put here on the slide is that it's an opportunity to, I hope, learn something new, share amongst your colleagues, be inspired by some of the fantastic stuff that's going on that I'm really looking forward to learning about today. And really importantly to take it back into the jobs that you do, into your organisations, into your networks, to help galvanise and catalyse this whole agenda. And thank you, I think, also to Sally and Jana for just the whole organisation of the event. I know from doing this in the past what a lot of work really underpins and sits behind getting delegates to come, have your coffee, your lunch, listen to the people who've come from all over the country and internationally. So thank you for all of that input and effort. And I enjoyed my coffee this morning, thank you. In terms of what to expect from my presentation over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I think when I spoke to Sally, really it's kind of a positioning policy piece. Probably worthy and not as interesting as some of the things you might hear in the later part of the day, but I do hope it will help you make connections, help understand some of the thinking in the Scottish Government around data policy and our emphasis around data strands and open data, and how that connects at the operational level to what you're doing. So we see it as part of the jigsaw piece. I'm probably going to headline quite a lot of what we do, and I'm very happy to take questions or catch me for a coffee after to go into more detail, or by the email address, or by phone, or whatever you're comfortable with. So really, I suppose I'm going to tell a bit of a story. And I'm going to start with the Digital Public Services Strategy, which was published in 2012, really looking at digital technology as a way to improve the service users' experience of public services and access to, for example, online service delivery. And one of the underpinning sort of themes or pillars in the delivery of that was recognising the role of data. And so the aim here, that's not the aim of the Digital Public Service Strategy, the aim here is about data, about driving the effective and responsible collection, management and use of data across public services as an enabler to that digital ambition. So to kind of make that happen, what we sort of pulled together was the Data Management Board, which was established in 2013, still very active. It meets quarterly. It has sectoral representation, as you would expect, from health, local government. We've got business, academia interests. We cover FOI and data protection. So we try to be as inclusive as we can for those who have an interest, experience and knowledge in the overall agenda. It's chaired by Sarah Davidson, DG Communities, and it has a remit to provide strategic direction and leadership across all areas of data, so not exclusively open data, but all data. So, very ambitious. And in terms of corralling that skills and knowledge around the table, their first sort of output or piece of work was a data vision for Scotland, which was published in 2014. It's framed around 10 guiding principles for the effective use and management and collection of data. And why I flag that up is that really that's where we first see the commitment to publish an open data strategy for Scotland. So there's a kind of chronology here in policy think terms of where we go with it. And in terms of time frame, some of this I would say is captured in terms of the shorter medium term, in that we're working in a time frame up to 2020. Obviously, we need to look forward and have longer term ambitions, but in terms of the time frame that we've kind of captured this in, it takes us to 2020. I'm not going to repeat the first quote, but that's one of the sort of opening mission statement in the data vision. And I guess the intent there was to really capture the potential of data, unlocking the potential of it, not just for public services, but for public good. And I think that's really important. It's kind of cross-boundary, cross-sectoral, what we can appreciate and do with data. And again, this extract was because in that narrative in the data vision, we begin to see some explicit talk around open data as a societal good or resource. And again, the language which you'll be probably very familiar with around reuse, and in a format which is obviously going to support and enable that migration across systems, across organisations, etc. for its use. So I hope that's useful just to help kind of position some thinking around open data. And I also wanted to mention the strategic action plan for data. I do wish we could find more interesting names for our documents. please send me emails and I'll look at them. But essentially, this was developed over a period of about a year with a lot of consultation and feedback from anyone with an interest. But what it wanted to do was realise the data vision by looking at deliverables. And what that document did was to look thematically at data, and where there we have a recognition that you have different data types. I'm sure you could have different names, but essentially that was the way that we have done it. Was in governance structures and underpinning boards that feed into data management boards who look at these more particularly. And there's one on open data, which includes spatial data. Data innovation, really working with academia and business and collaborative sort of clusters and expertise to drive the sort of economic value of data, and the sharing of personal data there, health and social care integration are particular examples. So we begin to structure some of our policy thinking, and there we also have some cross-cutting issues relevant to all, and I'll talk a little bit more about data quality and skills in a moment. So we published the Strategic Action Plan in February. It is to be reviewed annually. It has a delivery schedule at the back which looks at milestones and particular actions, again within the 2020 timeframe. And within that we have the commitment to publish an open data strategy. So here's kind of the links all coming in. So again, there was a commitment to do that. Just going to really, I suppose, quickly go over this slide insofar as just to get a common agreement, or just to recap open data in the principles. Again, I'm sure most of you are very familiar, but it's free when it's put out there. Is the kind of the underpinning principle. Via the internet, it's migratable, it's mobile, under open license, and that is pivotal. That enables the reuse. Non-personal or anonymised, obviously, so there are no conflicts around data protection issues. Really using the maturity ladder of the 5-star model of publication, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, deriving from the ODI in which he founded. So using that essentially as your sort of trajectory of travel and level of sophistication around open data publication. And easily discoverable. It's really of no use if you have a lot of stuff out there if you can't find it. And I guess the backdrop to that is probably around metadata and your cataloguing of data and structure in a way that seems sensible to all, so you can navigate and as I say, find it. So some of the drivers for publishing open data, and again, I'm just going to sort of headline these, but there is existing legislation, which really is a spine for this, which would include freedom of information at Scotland. We have the Inspire Directive for spatial data. There is the reuse of public sector information directive, which has actually been around since 2003, recently updated through regulations that were transposed in July, but are around publication by an organisation in relation to its public task. And there's the environmental information regs as well, as you flag up here. So we already have a framework that requires certain things around access to information and a culture that has sort of grown around that. And from an international perspective, we see in 2013 the G8 leaders adopting the Open Data Charter, based around particular, there's 5, I'll go to the next slide in a moment, but I think that's where we see a real sort of leadership commitment to open data, visibility, and some coherence around what that looks like. And I'll just go, I hope you can see some of the text, and appreciate it might be lost against the backdrop, but it's open data by default, quality and quantity, usable by all, improved governance, and data innovation. So again, very much in keeping with some of what I had said before. The open government movement, which really sort of took off in about 2011, I think, again is another backdrop to this, because this is about transparency and accountability by national governments, and it's about the whole relationship between government and citizens, and citizens having access to understanding how decisions are made, how money is spent. So Open Government Movement is an international movement. You can sign up to a charter, the UK is part of that. And open data is a particular work stream that falls under open government. Although again, I would probably emphasise that open data is something that is across the whole of the public sector. Open government is has more of a central government focus. But I think that again there's a real interesting link here just in terms of that sort of wider expectation from citizens about what they expect, whether it's through data release or the conversations they're having with the decision-making bodies in government or whatever parts of the public sector landscape. Better use by the public sector in designing public services. Use the data that we have, interrogate it, and look and find new, innovative, creative solutions. And I think there'll be sort of touch points in the programme along the way on that to kind of demonstrate how that's been happening in practice. But we can continually strive ourselves in public service to do more, to do better as part of continuous improvement. And a driver for innovation. And I think essentially that's, again, the point that open data can be reused for commercial and non-commercial purposes. So it can go out there and will help drive sort of, I guess, an economic commercial agenda quite legitimately. And again, I think there may be some comment or further talk around that during the course of the programme. Touched on the slide. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about why a strategy seemed relevant or necessary or something that would add value. And I do hope that you're aware that we published one in February of this year. Can I maybe ask you to show of hands if you did know this? Great, thank you. So essentially, why? From a ministerial perspective, DFM John Swinney has stated, probably a couple of years ago now, that he really wants Scotland to be a leading player around data and open data. Wants to be seen to be an exemplar, and for Scotland to have a voice or a position or a statement on this, to be seen as an advocate. And so the strategy, when you read it, it is only 8 pages long. It's one of the shortest strategies you'll ever get, but hopefully punch you to the point. Clearly aligns with the G8 principles that I put up there, and I suppose the international framework, and we wanted to be seen to have that alignment. And when Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister, came into office, she said right from the outset she wanted Scotland to be one of the most open governments, transparent government, again linking back to the open government movement and that sort of transparency and accountability agenda. It really emphasises the strategy, or I'd be interested to get your feedback on that, the open by default principle. Really the presumption is, if it's fitting the criteria of open data, it should be out there, notwithstanding obviously, you have to put in place your publication requirements. And so there's a real emphasis, not just on access to information, but about proactive publication. And I think that's about the culture change, the general direction of travel of the conversations government's having, and legislation, etc. And I think there's some really interesting discussions, or sort of, I think the interface between open data and freedom of information is something that is really important and we recognise as part of a sort of wider jigsaw piece as well. And on that point, I think I would emphasise that sometimes we've had feedback about data quality, and the sort of the concern that if the data is not going out there in a very polished way, the concerns about actually publishing it, we would say, don't worry about that. Get your data out, recognise if there's a weakness in it or a red flag or something that you need to draw attention to, but get your information out there, your open data, and then seek to rectify that. But issues around data quality themselves should not justify you not publishing. So again, I'm sure there are some views around the room on that. And collective responsibility, so that's my phrase, I should say, that I've added into the slides. And I was trying to capture a sense of the asset the strategy makes of public sector bodies in considering what data they hold, what is open data, putting in place publication plans, our baseline expectations to have a 3-star standard of publication by 2017. There's a lot of emphasis on organisations, what you have to do. So what is it that the centre should be doing to support you as part of that? There's a sort of responsibility in that relationship. And as part of a recognition of that in strategy, we set out some national actions. I'm going to focus on 2, the training and the resource pack, but essentially we wanted it to be our demonstration of the commitment that we have for open data in terms of doing this properly and in a way that's inclusive of the interests and the conversations we're having with stakeholders. And also that we're prepared to put some budgetary support behind this as well. It's not just a kind of statement of commitment, but we do want to support you in terms of delivering some toolkits and some resources. So I'm sure it's never enough given the scale of the size of the public sector, and this is a significant task, but we do hope that there is a recognition of the fact that we have to contribute to this agenda as well as individual organisations. And if there's more that you feel we need to do, we're always happy to have that conversation. So in wrapping that up, again, a statement in the strategy, we feel that we're wanting to make a push for an intelligent approach to open data. This isn't about data dumping and getting lots and lots of data out there that people can't find or to source, but we want to have a sort of a structure around it. We want to have conversations which we need to be going around the metadata, for example, and we sort of want to just make sure that we capture what's happening across the ground with good practice locally and help to kind of sort of aggregate that up into a national action. So what should we do to help? Well, we have published a resource pack in August. That was one of the commitments in the strategy. We endeavour to have conversations and make that an inclusive process about what should be in there. I think what we would recognise is it is a starting point. That document in itself is not the end game, full stop. And we've already got sort of ongoing traffic on our Knowledge Hub site, for example, about areas we need to focus on, to pick up on or pursue more detail, and we agree entirely with that. But I think what it did was kind of focus the conversation, we hope, on what were the key issues, and begin to kind of push those. And as I say, we do recognise there are some things that we will. So I think we're envisaging probably a refresh every 6 months. And as I say, and continue that iterative process of maturing it. And I think there are also plans to develop it as an e-learning model or modular whatever. We have procured our pilot programme of open data training. We did the procurement exercise over the summer. We have Urban Time now. And again, basically we've got an offering here of a sort of more headline open data interest, more operational hands-on. And the stats I got back yesterday were that of the 500 places, 25% have been taken already, covering 44 organisations. So I think that's a really good news story. It's fantastic. The marketplace is there. Where it takes us is that we will need to evaluate that. And we absolutely feel we have a responsibility to, if there is a business case, to procure further open data training under a framework, but at that point it would probably become a self-funding issue for organisations. And join us on the Knowledge Hub. What can you do to help us promote and raise awareness in your networks? You know, as I say, the quality versus quantity debate I touched upon there, and user feedback. Central government needs to talk to you and others. Please use your local networks. You know what's relevant in terms of getting for priority release as you consider publication schemes. So really, it's an ongoing conversation. Learn, share, inspire, do. I think maybe I'm over time, and thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Mark Braggins. I feel a bit churlish really because I'm coming here to represent Scotland. I'm not going to talk about Scotland twice. This talk is really it's a postcard, and it's focusing on stories from England really. So the idea is to share a few things in the form of a postcard with you. Apologies, I've got a cold, so both my voice is failing and my brain, so apologies in advance. Just briefly about me, I've jumped sector a number of times. So I've worked in retail and financial services. I've had a spell in software services. I'm specialising in high availability systems. I've worked in local government, which is where I was most recently, and I'm now sort of doing a bit of freelancing. I'm really just trying to help the open data movement move. So that's the gist of me. The AHA thing. I'm running a website called Open Data AHA. And the AHA bit is meant to be when somebody gets it about open data, there's a thing that's happened. Somebody's life has been saved, or money's been made, or money's been saved, or people have been more efficient, or whatever. People go, ah, that's what it's all about. There's a moment. And that often comes across in the form of stories. So people tell each other stuff about what's happened in a place. And what I'm trying to do is gather these stories together, make them available through one place, categorise them, tag them, show them on a map if they can be shown on a map. So if it applies to a place, then it'll be a dot on a map. And to hopefully make that available as a resource. So the idea is gather all these stories together and actually create a data set out of those stories, and then make that available with an open license so that you can chop it and change it and drill in and look at life-saving type ones or money ones or whatever you're interested in. For now, so I'll start with a world view, so there's a lot of stories all over the world. I've got about 2,000 at the moment. For today, really just looking at what's going on in England, what's happening, who's doing what and how. And this is a quick rattle through of some of those. Haven't got time to actually tell the whole story, so the slides will contain links to supporting information, so if you're interested in everything, you can go in and follow up on that yourself. I'm going to start, basically this is totally arbitrary, so it's things that have caught my attention. The fact that some places aren't listed doesn't mean that they haven't got some brilliant, world-changing stories, it's just that they're not included in this presentation, so there's no sort of slur intended on any place or people. Devon, they recently started as an Open Data Institute network node, and they're providing training for local people, for people who work in organisations, council and the like. And they're looking at like use cases, so they're trying to create personalities and say, well, as a stockbroker or a farmer or whatever you have to be, open data is this to me. So it's trying to make it real, so it's not sort of dry subject. They're also doing lots of other things, but I'll leave that to it, so you can have a look at their site and follow up all the examples. They're providing, so I think, stories and training for local people, and they're also using open data to inform their own decision making. So not exclusively open data, but you bring data in from other organisations, and you add it to your own data, and that helps inform your decision making within the organisation. But Hacked is brilliant. This is a real grassroots. It really started with local people who had some skills, some interest and ability, and they wanted to do some stuff with open data. And they talked to their local council, and now Bar Hacked is an amazing, it's a wonderful resource. You can't see it through this slide, so go and have a look at it. All sorts of apps and widgets and visualizations. They're really exciting, groundbreaking stuff that means something to local people. And there's also some good humour there. They're talking about things like there was an earthquake 3,000 miles away or something. And they get automatic notifications of this. And it's a bit of a laugh, but actually if there was an earthquake nearer, they would get those automatic notifications through it. Bristol is Open is another great example where there's loads of activity. They're taking a view, so looking at how can technology, how can sensors, how can the Internet of Things, how can those be harnessed so that you get much more in the way of real-time notifications, using the best of technology available. And this, I'm not actually very familiar with the detailed examples of this. I think it's in fairly early stages, but they have a real vision for the place, and they're looking at that. You know, the way the technology is going, how can we take advantage of that? So less emphasis on perhaps legacy systems, and how can we extract data out of ancient steam-driven computer systems. More of a case of harnessing that sort of technology energy going forward. Cambridgeshire. I think that strikes me as it's like a research and intelligence function. So it's about intelligent decision making, local observatory approach to things, but actually making data and information and knowledge available in a nicely packaged way. So they're telling data stories. So they're saying, there's this thing about your local area. This is our analysis, here's our commentary, and here's the supporting data and visual elements that you can look at yourself. So that's another very interesting example. Completely different technology being used, so the platforms aren't the same, but many of the principles are the same. And they're really targeting that sort of decision-making, public service organisations, but also reaching out to the public and to local communities as well. Hampshire, absolutely brilliant. Did I mention I looked at Hampshire Hub? Hampshire, there's a thing called Hampshire Hub. I might dwell on this just 2 minutes longer. A thing called Hampshire Hub, that's the brand that we called our local Open Data Initiative, partnership of 20-something organisations. So it's all the councils, but also some other organisations as well. So it includes Women's Survey, for instance, and the Army, police and fire, and various others. And the idea is, well, if you're going to be working together, you need to share certain information with each other, particularly in these days of reduced funding and transformation programs and the like. Really you just need to get your act together and be sharing stuff with each other. And if that can be done as open by default, then all sorts of organisations can be benefiting from that. The technology platform happens to be built on 5-star linked open data. So Rowena mentioned the 5 stars. So it's aspiring to the best connectivity of data possible. So it's using other people's data to describe your own data or to provide context for it. Well, that's kind of behind the scenes, so most people don't care about that stuff. It's just what can you tell me about my local area? And you can tell about your local area, and there are hundreds of local area profiles which have been created automatically from the data. So the charts, etc., are standard. They apply to a different geography each time. They've been created automatically. It means that it doesn't have to be created separately for every single ward, district, parish, and the like. Couple of specific examples before I move on. The approach we took in Hampshire was to actually find where's there some energy and go to where that energy is. So if people identify with each other as, say, a local community group or a business networking group or the like, we try and go to them and say, you know, and how can we help? We have limited resources, limited time, so we can get to everyone, of course. But there are some good examples, or we felt were quite good examples, where local technology companies said, oh, we can work with you on that. You know, do you want to partner on this initiative we've got in mind? Do you want to join us in a bid for funding to some fund somewhere to do something which is interesting and new and groundbreaking and the like? And we had a few of those. So the bottom left there, GP pressure map by a company called Inquiring Minds. They bid for funding to, I think it was Innovate UK. We went in with them and said, yeah, we'll work closely with you. And they've been creating some really interesting new visualizations and exercises, so that particular one is looking forward and it's drawing all sorts of different open data, including small area population forecasting. And you can look forward and anticipate which GP surgeries are going to be under the most pressure as you step through the years up to 2020. Now that's something, they've got the brain power and technology, we're bringing the data and the willingness to work with them, and hopefully that means that the people making decisions about health will be better informed as a result of that, and we minimise the amount of extra money that anybody has to pay for that. Another one up the top right there, which is called a flood event model, and this was a local digital leader from a company called Know Now, a guy called Chris Cooper. He came to an event called Blue Light Camp, which we happened to hold in Hampshire, and that was really innovation in and around emergency services. So we had remote, we brought the Hampshire Hub Open Data world together, so we were bringing open data and sort of disruptive innovation for emergency services together. And local business who came and thought, why can't we be better at predicting where flood events are actually going to occur? Why can't we take data, historic data, and begin to build theories about the likelihood of a flood event taking place, which might affect people's lives and require some sort of intervention from emergency services. So he went to that event, came up with the idea, put a bid into the Science and Technology Facilities Council, the Hartree Centre, so big data and science and tech, was awarded funding. So the project then ran to build a model to say, let's gather all this data together, let's create a common timestamp across it, let's identify what we think might be the triggers for a flood event occurring at a particular place. And let's actually run the model and see if we can prove it with more recent historic data. And the situation right now is that it's been proven for the county in Hampshire, and it's got, I think it's 85% degree of confidence that a flood event will occur that impacts people's lives. So, for instance, where they live, or where roads and rail interchange, or work. And that, now the model has been proven, that can then be supplemented with more real-time data. So you could be looking, give me the up-to-date data from satellite, for instance, give me the sensors in the rivers and the like. And that could be a really valuable, potentially that could be life-saving, it could save lots of money as well. So that's another example. I said it's moving more quickly. Before I begin it, but I like it, is the Minecraft vendor. And this was a guy called Chris Guttridge from the University of Southampton, who he just quite like his Minecraft. And he used data that had been made available with an open license, and he basically recreated a large chunk of the Isle of Wight in Minecraft, which would be brilliant. And there are others now doing that with environmental LiDAR data and the like as well. So I mean, it's a really neat way of engaging one another, but actually there could be some serious intent here as well. London, amazing resource, huge amount of data, lots and lots of visualizations, and I won't dwell on any of the individual ones there. They've done wonderful things, particularly around transport from the London Data Store. They've got brilliant, very senior support. The high-profile mayor of London banging the drum saying we've got to be doing more of this is really handy. So that's making money available. It's helping overcome barriers. So I think this is where the Scottish Government, City Council can make a real difference by getting senior people to say this is what we need to be doing, and then pointing at good examples from elsewhere, saying we can do that. We can do not only that, we can do more than that. Leeds is another leader. The Leeds Data Mill. Again, it's harnessing the energy of people with talent and expertise locally, working together with the local authorities and other public sector organisations to do some really neat stuff. It can be both entertaining, but also informative. People could be making money out of it, and people could be saving money out of it, and you can have a bit of a laugh as well. But Leeds superheroes versus superpowers, well, that's a bit silly, isn't it? So which, Superman has certain powers, Wonder Woman has other powers, Batman, etc. And that's an interactive cord glove open. You can click on one and you see the associated powers. Bit of a gimmick, but actually it's quite useful as well. And many other examples. I don't have time to go into that. Moving on to Manchester. Manchester's been doing open data for ages. I think it's 2010. They started having regular monthly meetups. I think it was the first hack day I ever went to was in Manchester. And they've got, again, it's local people, real experts, people who normally talk to local government people, getting together with, say, people with the data, people who have a need to do something, people who have the expertise, getting together and making happening. Another site well worth having a look at, and actually looking at some of the community groups and activities which aren't the data store. Actually, there are things happening in their own right, but actually just link back to the data store. Trafford falls within Greater Manchester, but is well worth exploring in its own right. The guy who leads the Trafford Innovation Lab is called James White. Very entertaining, knowledgeable speaker. Very extremely active in terms of trying new stuff. Have an idea, wonder if it will work. So an inquiry mind, an engaging personality, loads of interesting data. My favourite example is the one the Trafford defibrillators. Just to talk about that briefly, where the mayor of Trafford wanted to support charity. Defibrillators was what he chose. He went to Jamie, the innovation lab, and said, "Can you help me with a campaign? Where should we be putting them? We've only got a few we can put out there. How can we be intelligent about where we place them?" And they did a mixture of things. And that included crowdsourcing the location of existing defibrillators across Trafford, and there were about 30 or so. They also pulled together readily available open data, so demographics of population and age and the like. They went to the ambulance service and they got the call-outs in life-threatening situations. And they put all this together, and lots more that I can't remember. They put it all together, and they could see where the ambulance service being called out, where there were not defibrillators. They then used that to say, well, there are local businesses there who have large numbers of employees and perhaps qualified first aiders, and so they did that sort of gap analysis. They then did some engagement with the local businesses saying, would you like to help us? You potentially could save the life of an employee or a customer. And businesses were very receptive to it, and they've got something like 78 defibrillators out there now, and they've got three, I think it's currently 3 examples where people's lives were actually saved by defibrillators that were not there beforehand. And that guy in the top right is one of those individuals. A wonderful article linked to from that picture, which is about a real person whose life was actually saved through something dry and boring like open data. And there's loads and loads more that I can talk about travel, but the chord diagram. They produced a chord diagram for their leisure services, so which facilities have what services, and they've implemented Leeds' chord diagram, but for a practical use, which is leisure services and centres, Trafford. Leeds said, by all means, please reuse our superpower silly diagram for a practical purpose in another place. And all they've done is tip their hat saying, thanks very much, no money change next. So a more general point here, which is individual and collective energies. There are pockets of, there are people who are brilliant as individuals. There are people who gather together and they bring something new to the mix. I think if you're just beginning on a later initiative, it's not who's passionate about it, who's interested. Don't worry about the job title, the seniority or whatever. It's get the people who are keen, interested, want to make positive change. James Cattell's is a great example of that. He is actually off the ground. He's about 2 foot off the ground. He was facilitating Open Data Camp, the first one we had in Winchester. He started, I first knew him when he was in Birmingham, and I think he was working in housing, and he was junior, but he was passionate and keen, and he wanted things to be better. Constructive disruption, I think he called himself. And he went on to lead Birmingham's Open Data Initiative. He's now working in the Cabinet Office Transparency team and facilitating events like Open Data Camp. You find the people who have got the interest and the passion and then work with them, and that way you're much more likely to succeed. Jamie White, mentioned earlier, is another example of an individual. I'm just picking a few. And try to work out who are these people. How do you find them? There's a great visualisation on the top right there, produced by Tony Hurst, who's a lecturer from the Open University. And he was basically, I don't think he was even at the event, but back in time, he was saying, I wonder how people are connected who are doing this open data camp stuff at a weekend in their own time without being paid. And he came up with that visualisation. And if you were so inclined, you could actually be identifying people who have a public Twitter profile who are keen to do something in the area of open data, engage with them. Last point on this slide is it spans so many different sectors. Pick that photo, I can't remember the names of all the individuals, but there's a hyper-local journalist there from the Isle of Wight. There's a local government person. There is he's from the legislative office, the third one in from the right. Basically, it covers charities and profit makers and government, and I'll speed up. Common traits, I won't read all that because I don't have time. But there are things in these examples, and these are only some examples, and as I say, I haven't touched on Scotland, and I know that there are examples in Scotland already happening where a lot of this stuff is already taking place, but that's not the focus of my talk. So there are some common elements, but there are also some brilliant peculiarities which only apply to individual places. A few central gov agencies and the like who are actually proactive in this area in England. That's not all of them, but certainly a few of them. The Open Data Institute. I know that you've just had Aberdeen awarded ODI Network Note, which is brilliant. I think the ODI are doing wonderful work in galvanising, adding momentum, helping facilitate, move things along. Might go on that, and I think that's If you want to follow up, I've rattled through, and I've probably gone on much longer than I should have. But feel free to give me a shout if you would like to follow up on any of this.